Would you miss your flight for a stranger? Angela did. She wasn't rich. She wasn't famous. She was just a simple woman with a kind heart. But the moment she chose compassion over convenience, her entire world shifted in a way she never imagined. Welcome to Twilight Tales, where ordinary people make extraordinary choices. If this is your first time here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And let me ask you this: what would you do if a frail old man needed help, but it meant missing the flight to the job that could change your life? Today's story is not fiction. It's one of those rare moments that remind us how real kindness can lead to real miracles. It's about Angela, a humble black woman who was on her way to a life-changing job interview. She had worked tirelessly for months, scraping together every cent for a one-way ticket and a second-hand suitcase full of dreams. All she needed was to get to that interview on time. But fate had other plans. In a crowded airport terminal, as travelers rushed to board their flights and gate agents called out final boarding announcements, Angela noticed someone being left behind. An elderly white man, disoriented and struggling, sat slumped in a wheelchair with his papers spilling everywhere. People walked around him. Some looked. No one stopped. Except Angela. With only seconds to spare before her flight closed, she turned and walked toward the man. She bent down, picked up his documents, adjusted his coat, and asked softly, "Sir, do you need help?" That decision would cost her everything she thought she wanted. But it would lead her to something far greater than she could have ever imagined. What Angela didn't know, what no one in that terminal knew, was that the old man she helped wasn't just lost or frail. He owned the airline. And from that moment on, her life would never be the same. So stay with us. Because in today's tale, one woman's small act of humanity turns into a story of recognition, redemption, and an unbelievable twist that will leave you inspired. This is Twilight Tales, where every choice has a ripple, and sometimes the person you help is the one who holds the keys to your destiny. Angela stood at gate 47, her hands gripping the handle of her worn suitcase. She had just enough money left for a sandwich and a coffee, but her nerves had killed her appetite. The intercom had already announced final boarding for her flight to Seattle. Her dream job interview was less than 24 hours away. This was her one shot. One chance to leave behind the long shifts, the silent rejections, and the endless sacrifices. She'd taken night classes after her janitorial job, studied in laundromats, and slept on buses between shifts. The interview was for a logistics position. Nothing glamorous, but for Angela, it meant stability. A new beginning. As the boarding line shrank, she checked her ticket again, heart racing. That's when she heard it, a thud, then the sound of papers scattering on tile. She turned. An old man sitting in a wheelchair had dropped his folder. His boarding pass, ID, and medical documents were spread all over the floor. A few people glanced but kept walking. One airport employee gave him a tight smile and hurried by with a tray of coffee. Angela hesitated. She looked at the digital clock above the gate, 11:52 a.m. Final call was in 3 minutes. Someone will help him, she told herself. They have staff for that. But no one moved. The old man looked confused, blinking at the papers on the ground like they weren't his. He tried reaching down, but the wheelchair's lap belt held him back. Angela's feet moved before her mind did. "Excuse me," she said, stepping out of line. A man behind her muttered, "Really?" as she pushed her suitcase aside. She knelt next to the man, gathering the scattered pages. "Hi sir, I'm Angela. Are you okay?" He looked at her, eyes watery and confused. "I think I was supposed to be somewhere. My son was going to meet me, or was it my nurse?" Angela gently fixed his coat, tucked the folder back in his bag, and pressed the call button for assistance. But the terminal was busy. Help wasn't coming anytime soon. She looked up again, her gate was flashing, boarding closed. Her heart sank. She had just missed her only flight. No refunds. No job interview. No second chance. The old man looked at her with trembling hands. "Thank you, dear. Not many stop anymore." Angela smiled weakly. "That's all right, sir. Just glad you're okay." What she didn't see was the tall man a few feet away watching her. Dressed in plain clothes, holding a coffee, eyes sharp behind gold-rimmed glasses. He had seen everything. And he wasn't just a traveler. He was the owner of the airline. And Angela had just changed everything. The man with the coffee never blinked. His name was Richard Carmichael, and while most people at the airport didn't recognize him without the cameras or boardroom spotlight, every executive in the aviation industry knew his name. He wasn't just a CEO. He was the founder and majority owner of Carmichael Air, one of the fastest-growing airline conglomerates in the country. He wasn't supposed to be at Gate 47. His private jet had been grounded due to mechanical issues, so he had chosen, for the first time in years, to fly commercial. And as fate would have it, he decided to watch how his own company treated passengers. But what caught his attention that day wasn't his staff or service. It was her. The young black woman with a scuffed suitcase and shoes that had clearly walked too many miles. She had stared at that gate like it was everything she'd ever worked for, and then stepped out of line without hesitation. Not to get ahead. Not to take advantage. But to help a stranger. Richard took a sip of his coffee, lips curling at the corner. He'd sat through hundreds of interviews with Ivy League grads who boasted about teamwork and compassion on their resumes. But here it was, authentic kindness in the middle of a crowded terminal. He watched as the gate agent closed the door, indifferent to Angela's efforts. Her shoulders drooped, but she didn't complain. She simply knelt back beside the old man, helping him sit comfortably while waiting for airport staff to arrive. Richard pulled out his phone and snapped a quick picture, not of her face but of the moment. He wasn't sure what he would do yet, but he knew this. People like her didn't go unnoticed. He walked over slowly and spoke first. "Miss, that was a beautiful thing you just did." Angela turned, startled. "I'm sorry, did I block the aisle or?" No, quite the opposite." He extended his hand. "Richard Carmichael." She blinked. "Carmichael, like Carmichael Air?" He smiled. "The same." Her eyes widened. "Oh wow. I fly your airline. Or I tried to." She chuckled softly, glancing toward the now closed gate. "I guess not today." He looked down at her suitcase, her still open boarding pass, and then at the old man beside her. "You gave up your flight for him?" Angela shrugged. "He needed help. I couldn't just leave him like that." Richard paused for a beat, then said something that made Angela's heart skip. "Well, you might have missed your flight, but I think you just landed something bigger." She looked at him, confused. And that's when he asked, "Can you join me in the executive lounge for a moment? I'd like to hear more about you." Angela stared. Was this a dream? She followed, unaware that the opportunity of a lifetime had just begun. The executive lounge was quiet, miles away from the noise of delayed flights, angry announcements, and long lines. Angela sat stiffly in one of the leather armchairs, unsure if she should cross her legs or sit upright. She had never been in a place like this before. She hadn't even known it existed. Richard Carmichael, still in his simple coat and jeans, offered her a drink. She shook her head, still stunned. He sat down across from her and leaned forward. "So, tell me, what do you do?" Angela hesitated. "Honestly? Right now, I work nights at a diner and take care of my grandma. I was flying to Atlanta for a job interview. Nothing fancy, just an office assistant position." Richard nodded. "You mentioned you were in school?" I studied education. Wanted to teach little kids. But then my mom passed and, well, life got expensive." There was no self-pity in her voice, just quiet honesty. "And yet," he said, "when you had the chance to make that flight, you still stopped to help." Angela smiled gently. "My mother always said, if you see someone struggling and you walk away, then maybe you're the one who's truly lost." I couldn't just leave that man there. Richard was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "Do you know why I'm in this lounge instead of flying on my private plane?" She shook her head. "I wanted to see what kind of people fly my airline. What they deal with. What we can do better. But today I saw something I didn't expect. A moment that reminded me why I started this company in the first place." Angela blushed. "I'm not sure what I did was that big." He smiled. "That's exactly why it was." Then he stood up and walked over to a nearby assistant. After whispering something, he returned with a tablet in hand. "This is a job offer," he said, sliding it across the table. "It's not an assistant role. It's a position with our community outreach and training division. Full-time. Salary. Benefits. And..." He paused. "Relocation assistance if you still want to move to Atlanta." Angela stared at the screen. Her mouth opened slightly but no words came out. "I don't understand," she finally whispered. "Why me?" Richard leaned back in his chair. "Because real integrity isn't taught in a boardroom. It's lived. And you lived it, right there in that terminal." A tear rolled down Angela's cheek. "I was just trying to do the right thing." "You did," he said gently. "And now it's my turn." At that moment, Angela realized her life had just changed forever. Not because she chased an opportunity, but because she lived her values when no one was watching. Only, someone had been. And now the door was wide open. The next morning, Angela woke up in a hotel room she could have never afforded just days before. A soft king-sized bed, a breakfast tray at her door, and her name spelled correctly on a handwritten welcome note from the airline's executive office. But before she could even sip her orange juice, her phone buzzed. What? Then again. Then it didn't stop. Her cousin had tagged her in a post. "Girl, you're on the news?" Angela frowned, clicked the video, and saw a familiar terminal, a familiar elderly man in a wheelchair, and herself. It was footage from the airport security cameras, grainy but clear, showing the moment she knelt beside Mr. Jacobson, helped lift his bag, and stayed with him when everyone else rushed by. Her voice was barely heard saying, "It's okay, sir. Take your time. You're not alone." The clip had been shared by the airline's official page, and within hours it had gone viral. Stranger skips flight to help elderly man, airline CEO steps in. Kindness at Terminal 4, the story that melted the internet. Black woman chooses compassion over convenience, gets rewarded beyond her dreams. Angela was overwhelmed. She wasn't used to being seen, not like this. The spotlight made her nervous. But when Richard Carmichael called again that morning, he reassured her. "We didn't make you famous," he said with a laugh. "You made yourself unforgettable." The company's PR team had already scheduled interviews. Major outlets. Morning talk shows. Even a sit-down with People magazine. And yet, Angela wasn't chasing cameras. She was still processing the reality that her one act of humanity was now inspiring people around the world. She got texts from strangers, teachers, nurses, single moms, thanking her for reminding them that goodness still existed. An elementary school in Detroit even invited her to speak to their fifth graders about integrity. Angela stared at her reflection in the mirror and whispered, "What is happening to my life?" Her grandma, watching proudly from a hospital bed back home, called her later that day. "You always had a heart too big for your own good," she said. "And now look, the world's finally catching up to it." That afternoon she signed her job contract. Full relocation support. A training role that let her teach values-based service to thousands of employees. And a future filled not with limitations, but with purpose. Angela didn't just get a new career. She got a platform. And she was determined to use it for more than herself. Because if one kind act could ripple across an entire nation, maybe it was time the world redefined what power looked like. It looked like compassion. It looked like patience. And sometimes, it looked like a black woman at gate 22 holding the hand of a man who just needed someone to care. Angela had barely settled into her new role at Carmichael Air when the real surprise arrived. 1 month into training staff on empathy, customer care, and ethical service, she received an unexpected message from Richard's executive assistant. "Please be at Hangar 3 this Saturday morning. Business casual attire. No questions. RC." Perplexed but curious, Angela followed the instructions. When she arrived, a sleek black car was waiting. The driver greeted her with a warm smile, handed her a small box with her name on it, and opened the door. Inside the box? A platinum flight pin. Engraved with the words, "Compassion is leadership." When the car stopped, Angela stepped out onto the private tarmac. A luxury jet sat gleaming before her, not a standard passenger plane, but a custom-designed aircraft with her initials stenciled discreetly beneath the cockpit window, AB. Angela blinked, speechless. Richard Carmichael descended the steps of the plane, holding a cappuccino in one hand and a folder in the other. "Thought we'd take a little detour today," he said. "You've been working hard. Let's show you the world you helped change." She barely managed to speak. I don't understand. What is this?" He handed her the folder. Inside was a certificate naming her as the official global ambassador of human-centered service for Carmichael Air. "You've inspired millions, Angela," he said sincerely. "You helped me remember why I started this company. And now, I want you to help others remember too." As the engines roared to life, she stepped aboard. The inside of the jet was more than luxurious. One wall displayed rotating messages sent from passengers around the world, all thanking her. Screens showed live comments from social media. "She made me cry. We need more Angelas in this world. Because of her, I waited with a stranger today." But the final surprise came mid-flight. Richard turned to her and said, "There's someone I'd like you to meet." From the back cabin walked a teenage boy in a navy hoodie. His eyes lit up when he saw Angela. It was Mr. Jacobson's grandson. "I wanted to say thank you," he said softly. "My grandpa told me what you did before he passed. He said you reminded him of my grandma. That you made him feel safe again." Angela's heart broke and healed, all in one breath. That moment, in the sky, far above the noise of everyday life, she realized something powerful. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was the story of every act of kindness that had ever gone unseen. And now, finally, it was being seen, by the world, by a grieving grandson, and most importantly, by Angela herself. She had become a symbol of quiet power. The kind that doesn't yell to be heard. The kind that doesn't need a title to lead. The kind that changes everything, simply by caring. Angela's story had already traveled faster than she ever could, across runways, through newsrooms, into living rooms and classrooms. But what happened next pushed her into a spotlight she never asked for, and couldn't avoid. It started with a morning talk show interview. She wore a modest teal blouse and spoke gently, still a little unsure of how to handle the sudden fame. The host asked, "Angela, did you know your one decision would change your life?" Angela chuckled. "Honestly, I just thought I was going to miss my flight and maybe get yelled at. I didn't expect all of this." That moment, that honesty, went viral again. But something even more unexpected happened. Women from all over the country, especially black women, began reaching out. Not just to praise her kindness, but to say, "Thank you for showing that dignity doesn't have to look like money. That strength doesn't have to be loud." Angela had become a quiet revolution. Colleges invited her to speak. Churches asked her to share her journey. Airlines across the globe reached out to model their training programs after hers. She was even approached by a publishing company to write a book titled Gate 22, where compassion took off. Her grandma, recovering beautifully, clutched the first printed copy and whispered, "See? You didn't miss your flight. You just boarded a better one." But not everyone celebrated her rise. Some critics online called it performative. "She's just lucky the old man was rich," one tweet read. Angela didn't reply. She didn't need to. Because for every critic, there were 1,000 others who remembered the feeling of being overlooked, and finally felt seen. Her story became more than a feel-good moment. It sparked conversations in boardrooms and employee lounges. CEOs began asking, "Are we rewarding kindness in our company culture? Are we noticing the Angelas in our own teams?" Even schools began implementing Angela Days, encouraging students to perform silent acts of kindness and journal the results. But what grounded Angela the most wasn't the fame, it was the kids. One day, at a middle school in Atlanta, a young black girl nervously approached her after a speech and whispered, "Miss Angela, can people like us really make a difference?" Angela knelt down, looked her in the eyes and replied, "Sweetheart, people like us are the difference." That night, flying home, she stared out the window as the stars blinked back at her. She thought about the old man, about the terminal, about how life sometimes rearranges everything. Not through power, not through noise, but through one simple choice. To stop. To help. To care. She didn't chase the spotlight. But when it came, she made sure to reflect it onto others. Because that's what real service does. It doesn't shine for the world. It helps the world shine. Angela stood at the gate of a private jet, not in a uniform, not in a rush, but in quiet awe. The man she helped, Mr. Ellis Carraway, now fully recovered, had invited her on what he called the final flight. But this wasn't goodbye. This was legacy. As they soared above the clouds, Ellis turned to her, sipping tea, and said, "You know, Angela, I've had jets, towers, power, but none of it felt right until someone like you reminded me why I built it in the first place." Angela smiled politely, unsure how to respond. He continued, "There's something I didn't tell you." He opened a sleek leather folder and slid it across the table. Inside were documents. Legal ones. Ownership papers. Partnership papers. Scholarship funds. Angela looked up, stunned. "This airline will have your name on it, not because you saved my life, but because you reminded me how to live it better." She couldn't speak. The woman who once quietly handed boarding passes and brewed lukewarm coffee in coach was now being handed the keys to an empire. But more than that, a platform. Not just for her, for every invisible soul in the service industry who had ever been overlooked, ignored, or dismissed. Angela wasn't just being honored. She was being empowered. Ellis had created a foundation in her name, the Angela Hart Initiative, dedicated to training, mentoring, and advancing women of color in aviation and hospitality leadership. The old man smiled, a tear in his eye. "You helped me when I was a nobody in your eyes. So now it's my turn to make sure the world never forgets who you are." When the plane landed, cameras awaited. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters shouted. But Angela didn't rush to the microphones. She walked straight toward a janitor leaning on his mop in the corner. She shook his hand, thanked him, and whispered something in his ear. He smiled. Later the press asked what she said. She replied, "I told him I see him. That's all." That moment went more viral than any speech could have. Because Angela understood something powerful. People don't want to be praised. They want to be seen. That final flight wasn't about luxury or inheritance. It was about lifting others. About remembering that the altitude you reach means nothing if you forget those still on the ground. Angela's journey began with a missed flight. But in the end she took off in a way no plane could measure. Sometimes missing a flight isn't the end of your journey, it's the beginning of your purpose. Angela didn't plan to be a hero. She didn't know her simple act of kindness, staying behind to help an old man no one else noticed, would unlock the doors to a future she never imagined. She wasn't trying to be seen. But because she chose to see someone else, the world saw her. That's what makes this story powerful. Not the jet. Not the billionaire. Not the cameras. It was the moment when a woman who had every reason to rush, every right to ignore, made a choice, to care. Angela reminds us that kindness doesn't wait for recognition. It acts even in silence. And sometimes the reward is far bigger than a seat on a plane. It's a seat at the table. To everyone watching this episode of Twilight Tales, ask yourself, small blue diamond, would I have done what Angela did? Small blue diamond, do I pause for people who can't offer me anything in return? Small blue diamond, have I overlooked someone today who just needed to be seen? Angela's story challenges us to look around, to look beyond ourselves. Because the next person you help might not be a billionaire, but they might change your life just the same. And if this story touched you, if it made you think, smile, or even tear up a little, don't let it stop here. Backhand index pointing right, click that like button if you believe small kindness can lead to big change. Backhand index pointing right, share this video with someone who always puts others first. Backhand index pointing right, and if you're new here, hit subscribe to join the Twilight Tales family, where we bring you real stories that inspire real heart. Also, tell us in the comments, have you ever helped someone and been surprised by what happened next? We read every message. Your story might just be the next one we tell. Because at Twilight Tales, we believe one small act can light up the darkest skies. Until next time, stay kind, stay aware. And never underestimate the power of simply being there.